My son gave my lake cabin to his in-laws during a Sunday barbecue. He didn't ask me. He didn't pull me aside. He didn't even lower his voice. He stood on my back deck with a paper plate in one hand, pointed toward the water, and said, "You guys should use the cabin this summer. Honestly, it just sits there most of the time." Then he reached into his pocket and handed his father-in-law a spare key to my cabin. The same cabin my late wife, Margaret, and I bought 34 years earlier with money we saved from skipped vacations, overtime shifts, and a coffee can full of loose bills she kept in the pantry. I was 76 years old, widowed, and apparently old enough for my only son to start giving away my property while I was still standing there holding barbecue tongs. His mother would have set the deck on fire before she let him get away with it. I just watched. That cabin sat on Lake Waverly, about 40 minutes from my house. It wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a screened porch that leaned slightly to the left, and a dock I repaired every spring whether it needed it or not. But to Margaret, it was paradise. She used to say, "George, one day the kids will bring their kids here, and nobody will care who made what salary or who bought the biggest house. They'll just remember the lake." That was what she wanted the cabin to be. A place to come together. Not a prize. Not a bargaining chip. Not something one person could use to impress another family. My son Aaron used to love that place when he was little. He caught his first fish off that dock. He carved his initials under the porch railing. He learned to paddle a canoe there, though he mostly learned how to fall out of one. But after he married Claire, things changed. Claire came from money. Not billionaire money, but the kind where everyone wore linen to lunch and said summer property instead of cabin. Her parents, Russell and Diane, were polite in the way people are polite when they think you are beneath them. They called me simple. Not directly. Never directly. It was always wrapped in compliments. "George is so down to earth. George really knows how to live with less. George's little cabin has such rustic charm." Rustic charm meant old furniture. Down to earth meant not rich. And little cabin meant something they thought could be upgraded once I was out of the way. That Sunday barbecue was supposed to be for my granddaughter Emily's college graduation. I hosted it at my house because Aaron said his backyard was being landscaped, and Claire couldn't handle people tracking dirt through the kitchen. So I bought the meat. I cleaned the deck. I set out Margaret's blue serving bowl because Emily always liked it. About an hour into the party, Russell started talking about how hard it was to find a decent lake rental for July. "Everything's booked," he said, shaking his head. "And the places available are either overpriced or terribly outdated." Aaron laughed and said, "Dad's cabin is outdated, but at least it's free." I looked up from the grill. Claire said, "Aaron." But she didn't sound upset. She sounded like he had revealed the surprise too early. Aaron waved me off. "Dad won't mind. He barely goes up there anymore." "I go every Thursday," I said. He smiled like I had made his point. "Exactly. You check on it. That's not the same as using it." Russell chuckled. "Well, we wouldn't want to impose." Then Aaron said, "You wouldn't be. Use it all summer." That was when he handed over the key. I set the tongs down. "Aaron," I said, "the cabin isn't available for that." The deck got quiet. Diane looked at me over her sunglasses. "Oh. I thought Aaron said it belonged to the family." "It does," Aaron said quickly. "Dad's just old-fashioned about permission." There it was. Old-fashioned. A nice clean word for in the way. I said, "Permission matters when the property is mine." Aaron's face tightened. "Dad, don't make this awkward." Russell held up the key and gave an amused little smile. "George, we'd take excellent care of it. Probably better than it's been cared for, honestly." I felt something in my chest go cold. Before I could answer, Aaron leaned close and said quietly enough that most people couldn't hear, but loud enough that I could, "Eventually it'll be mine anyway." That was the cruel line. Not because of the cabin. Because Margaret had died in that cabin. She passed 5 summers earlier after a long fight with heart failure. Her last good month was spent on that screened porch, wrapped in a yellow blanket, watching the sun go down over the water. Aaron knew that. And he still looked at me like I was only delaying his inheritance. I picked up the tongs again. "The burgers are done," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grab the key. I didn't embarrass Emily on her graduation day. But I remembered something Margaret had insisted on before she died. A clause. At the time, I thought it was unnecessary. She had been sitting at the kitchen table with our attorney, Patricia Bell, reviewing the deed documents and trust papers. Margaret was thin then, but her mind was sharp as a new blade. She said, "If anyone tries to treat the cabin like it belongs to them before George is gone, they don't deserve it after he is." I told her Aaron would never do that. Margaret looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You are a good man, George. But sometimes good men confuse hope with evidence." The clause was her idea. And my son had just stepped directly into it. That night, after everyone left, I drove to the cabin. I sat on the porch in the dark and listened to the water bump against the dock. The spare key Aaron had given Russell wasn't the only one. I still had the master set. On the table beside me was Margaret's old notebook. She used to write grocery lists in it. On the inside cover she had written, "Keep this place kind." I read that line for a long time. The next morning, I called Patricia. She remembered the clause immediately. "It's enforceable," she said. "But we need documentation that Aaron attempted to transfer use or benefit of the property without your consent. He handed over a key in front of 12 people. Witnesses help. Written evidence helps more." So I waited. That was the hard part. I wanted to call Aaron and tell him exactly what he had risked. I wanted to tell Russell to mail the key back before I changed the locks. I wanted to hear Claire's family choke on the word rustic. But revenge is like fishing. If you splash too early, you scare everything away. 2 days later, Aaron emailed me. Subject line, "Cabin scheduled, Dad, just putting this in writing so there's no confusion. Claire's parents will use the cabin from June 28th through August 15th. We'll need access to the dock, shared canoe, and both bedrooms. Russell wants to bring in a cleaning service and maybe update some of the furniture, which would only help the property value. This is important for family harmony, and I need you to be reasonable. You've always said the cabin was for family. Claire's family is family too." I forwarded it to Patricia. Her reply came 20 minutes later. "That will do." The next step was not dramatic. It was paperwork. Patricia sent Aaron a formal notice stating that he had no authority to assign, lease, lend, represent, or transfer use of the cabin. She also cited the deed clause Margaret had created. Aaron called me immediately. "What is this lawyer nonsense?" "It's a letter," I said. "You're seriously threatening me over a summer visit?" "No. I'm informing you of the terms attached to the cabin. You're being petty." "I'm being precise." He hated that. Aaron had always hated precision when it didn't favor him. Claire called next, which surprised me. She had never called me unless she needed a recipe of Margaret's, or a signature for a school fundraiser. "George," she said, voice tight, "this has gotten out of hand." "I agree. My parents are embarrassed. They should return the key." She paused. Aaron was only trying to be generous. Was something he didn't own. Then she said, "You know, holding on to property at your age can make people question whether you're making decisions emotionally." There it was. The assisted living adjacent threat. I said, "Claire, if you or Aaron imply I'm incompetent again, the next letter will be longer." She hung up. That same afternoon, Russell sent his own email. I assume he thought his business tone would intimidate me. "George, Aaron represented that the cabin would be available to us this summer. Diane has already purchased lake equipment, arranged time off, and declined other accommodations. We expect you to honor what was promised." Russell Wickham I forwarded that too. Patricia called me laughing. Not loudly, but enough. George, they're building the case for us. Within 10 days, Patricia filed the necessary documents to activate the clause Margaret had written. It did not simply remove Aaron's summer access. It permanently disqualified him from inheriting the cabin or controlling its use after my death. And because Margaret had planned one step further, the clause provided an alternate destination. If Aaron forfeited future rights, the cabin would transfer into the Waverly Conservation and Respite Trust, a local nonprofit partnership that preserved lakefront land and provided short-term stays for families dealing with serious illness. Margaret had chosen that organization herself. At the time, I thought it was just backup language. It turned out to be her final act of common sense. The legal reveal happened in Patricia's office with Aaron, Claire, Russell, Diane, and me sitting around a polished table that smelled faintly of lemon oil. Aaron looked annoyed, not worried. Patricia handed everyone copies. As a result of Mr. Aaron Whitcomb's documented attempt to assign use of the property without the owner's consent, the conditional inheritance clause has been triggered. Aaron frowned. Conditional what? Patricia explained slowly. The more she talked, the paler he got. When she reached the part about permanent forfeiture, Aaron slammed his hand on the table. That's insane. He's doing this because he's mad. No, Patricia said calmly. Your mother wrote this clause. Your father is enforcing it. That shut him up for about 3 seconds. Then he turned to me. You're giving away my inheritance? I looked at my son and saw, for just a moment, the little boy with lake water dripping from his hair, holding up a bluegill and shouting for his mother. That memory hurt. But not enough to make me stupid. I'm honoring your mother's wishes. Claire's mother, Diane, leaned back and muttered, over a cabin. I looked at her. No, I said. Over the belief that old people are just obstacles between you and their property. Russell tried to argue expenses, embarrassment, expectations. Patricia let him talk. Then she placed his email on the table. You wrote that you expected George to honor what was promised, she said. Who promised it? He looked at Aaron. Aaron looked down. That was the moment the room changed. Because finally, publicly, everyone understood the problem. Aaron had given away what wasn't his, to impress people who already thought less of him for needing it. The consequences came fast. Russell and Diane lost their free summer lake house. Claire was humiliated in front of her parents. Aaron lost all future rights to the cabin. And because the attempted use had been documented, he couldn't challenge the trust without risking an even uglier court record. For a month, Aaron didn't speak to me. Then he sent one text. Mom would be ashamed of you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back, your mother wrote the clause. He never replied. The following spring, I signed the final transfer documents with the Waverly Conservation and Respite Trust. I retained lifetime access, exactly as the deed allowed. I could still go every Thursday. I could still sit on the porch. I could still keep Margaret's yellow blanket folded over the old wicker chair. But now, when I wasn't there, the cabin would be used by families who needed quiet. The first family arrived in June. A couple with 2 young children. The mother was undergoing treatment at the Regional Cancer Center, and they needed 1 week where the kids could swim, fish, and forget hospital smells. I stopped by only once to fix a loose porch screen. The little boy asked if there were frogs by the dock. Too many, I told him. He grinned like I had promised him treasure. That evening, I sat in my truck and cried before driving home. Not because I had lost the cabin. Because I finally understood that Margaret hadn't been trying to keep the cabin away from Aaron. She had been trying to keep it kind. My son thought the cabin was his future asset. His in-laws thought it was a free rental. Claire thought it was a status upgrade. Margaret thought it was a place where tired people could breathe. In the end, her version won. I still go every Thursday. I sweep the porch, check the dock, drink coffee from the chipped blue mug Margaret loved, and watch families arrive with coolers and tired faces. Some know my story. Most don't. That's fine. I don't need applause. I just need the place to be what my wife wanted it to be. Aaron lost the cabin because he treated my life like a waiting room before his inheritance. And every time I see a sick parent laughing on that dock with their children, I think the same thing. Margaret's final clause didn't take the cabin out of the family. It made the family bigger.